looked like a big. Oh my god. That's concerning. I don't know. Hey,
Do you want to run outside and check to see if he's around? He's got a white Toyota that's not.
I didn't buy it. Hey, Manisha.
Good. All right, everybody good? Ready to start?
Once he's underway, like I want like content, not just the opening slide.
Not just the slide that shows my pictures of myself.
I want to post the Instagram story in the next hour. If you don't send me a photo, we're fighting.
okay. So what do you have for a day?
All right, welcome everybody to Workshop Wednesday Photography. Have to follow up Brian on his controls one, so we'll see how we do. If anybody does not have a camera and wants one, come grab any of these ones here, and we can go over stuff. As you see, you can play around with the cameras and put into practice some of the things that we're going to talk about. So obviously, you guys know me, but this is also a run through for something I'm doing for New England First to try and elevate our photography across the board. So you get to see the "Who am I" slide, but you guys know who I am. But I've been photographing FRC since 2009, and I have the massive volunteer and media passes to prove it. Those are always a fun thing to hang on to when you volunteer, so volunteer for events. My photos have been for teams, for the districts, and also for newspaper. So photos have actually been in print, which is really fun to see your great high-resolution print, your great high-resolution photo reduced down to newspaper print and go, ooh, that's pretty bad. And for my day job for a very long time now has been in technical training. So if you have ever watched a help video on how to fix your Roomba or gotten a notification in your app from iRobot saying, hey, do this thing, those are probably my hands on screen that you're going to see fix the robot. So that is fun. And also, as we go through anything today, stop me at any point if you have questions. I'm happy to dive in, pause, talk more about the pictures that you see. Not this slide, this slide's boring. But the big question is, why are we doing this? Why do we take so many pictures? And something that you want to do is tell the story of your team. We do a lot of really cool stuff. You see the photos and video that teams present in their sponsorship brochures, on their social media, talking to judges, in their videos. It's fun. We do a lot of really cool stuff. You guys get really excited, and we want to share that. Sometimes you look very serious. But we also want to capture that. There's a lot of things that happen at an FRC event, and we're going to talk about specifically FRC photography, but this applies to really any event, a football game, a concert. It's all about capturing that story, FLL, FTC, really anything. You're trying to tell the story of the event. So in the case of shooting an event for Team 1100, you want to tell Team 1100's story at that event. When I'm doing something for New England First, I'm trying to tell the story of that whole event, from setup to teardown to the awards to the volunteers to the teams, for everybody. So there's a lot. But we have all of that same stuff on the team. And it's cool to take pictures, but what actually makes pictures good and interesting? It's, obviously photos are an art. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is, some of it's very technical, and here's how an image is made and how the camera actually captures it, versus what's an artistic thing. I can't tell you what that is. If you like the way that it looks, I'm not here to tell you that that's wrong. That's, part of taking pictures is everybody has a little bit of different style, and that's great because we bring more to it. When we talk about a picture, we talk about framing a picture. So when I, look through the viewfinder or look to the LCD screen, what am I actually seeing? What am I trying to capture? Obviously, your eyes draw to the center of a picture, but that gets boring after a while. So a really common thing that you'll see in photography talked about is the rule of thirds, which is where you will break up the photo into these 9 boxes, and you will try and put your action in somewhere that's a little more interesting than just in the center. So in the case of this photo here, it's a full reef and a climb, but if I just had the reef in the center or just had the climb in the center, it's not necessarily as interesting a picture. And studies have shown that when you are actually looking at a picture, the eyes go to this upper left here first, then the lower, and then kind of around to the right side of the picture. So that's just kind of where your eyes are naturally drawn when looking at an image. And just when you're framing your picture, think about that. A lot of cameras will have the ability to actually turn this on. So if you are looking through the viewfinder or looking at the screen, now there's a lot of stuff going on here, but you can actually see the grid is right there ready to go to actually help you do that in camera. Not as common in a DSLR where you're actually looking through the mirror. And that's something I'll get into a little bit at the very end, the types of different cameras and the technology. We've got a bunch of them represented here, so we'll go through that. Any questions so far? Cool. So what actually makes up an image? In photography, you'll hear something called the exposure triangle. Basically, there's 3 things that make up an image. There's how long the shutter is open for and how long that image sensor is actually recording the image. There is the aperture, which is how large the opening in the lens is, so how much light the lens is allowing into the camera and into the sensor. Then you've got ISO, which, joking around with some of the mentors earlier, is what you used to refer to as the film speed. So it was actually the construction of the physical film that you were taking in the camera. Now it is the sensitivity of that image sensor to light. So it's how it's actually processing the image. As you raise the ISO higher, you will get more noise and grain in the image. So it is a trade-off. You can't just go all day long shooting at a super high ISO. Those images are not going to be as good. They'll be less clear, and there'll be more noise in them. But as you adjust any one of these, the other also needs to be adjusted for a properly exposed image. If you put the ISO way down, the shutter speed way up, and the aperture way down, it's going to be too dark. If you go the other way around, it's going to be way too bright, and it's going to be like looking into the projector here where you just can't see anything. We're going to dive into each one of the bits here a little bit more, except for ISO. That one doesn't really change a lot in terms of like the creative stuff that you're going to do with a picture. When you're looking at the actual shutter speed, so I got a lot of questions about the panning images where you actually will see, a robot or a person being clear, but the whole background is blurry and panning. And that's down to the shutter speed that image was taken at, as well as to match the robot or the person moving, you actually have to be moving the camera at the same speed. So that way when the image is taken, you're moving at the same speed as the robot, so it's still clear, but everything else around it was moving, so it's blurry. You get, I will take hundreds, if not thousands of pictures when I'm doing this, and you're really just kind of at the luck of how the robot moved, because if the robot moved away from you or towards you, you're panning side to side, it's going to now be blurry in that direction. This is a lot easier with a car going on a street that's parallel to you, or an airplane that's taking a very predictable path. So when you're doing this with robots, you throw out a lot of junk pictures, but it's great. Everything's digital now, so you're not wasting a bunch of film to try and figure that out. When you're trying to actually stop everything, so you want the background to also be clear, that's when you're going to want a faster shutter speed. And this is something that it's a lot easier now to just play around with and see what works. When I do panning, generally I'm in the 1/30th to 1/50th of a second time frame. I find that's kind of where the limit is to actually get a clear picture. And a faster shutter speed will freeze that action if something's happening faster, but sometimes you can't go that fast because we're in a dark gym that's poorly lit and you can't really raise your ISO anymore. You can't open your aperture any wider. So you kind of just have to make a sacrifice and get creative. Maybe you do more panning images because that's what the light allows you to do in that situation. Got a couple of great pictures here to really show the difference between a fast shutter and a slow shutter. Here from WPI, if the projector would, oh, there we go. Okay.
It's on your screen, but not on the projector?
No, it does not want to show the full screen image. That's weird. Thanks, PowerPoint. So this is a fast shutter. This was, I think, up around 1/250. You see, all the people are clear, all the robots are clear, everything is stopped. This is a frozen moment in time. And, you know, for a big overview like this, that's fine. A lot of times you really want to play around with introducing different shutter speeds because it'll, you know, a picture of just a robot sitting there on the field is not all that interesting to look at, but seeing an arm moving in motion and having the robot be frozen, but the arm still moving, that's a lot cooler. So if we look at the second picture here, this is roughly the same perspective. I think it's the same match even, but this is actually like a couple second exposure where you can see, I think, one of these two is us. I'm not sure which one, probably this one based on the pattern of the LEDs. But you can see that the field and all the elements that are stationary, and the people even, some of them you can see are not moving all that much. Like our drive team is very still, but if you look at the head ref here, you can see she is very blurry because she is moving as part of this. And the robots will leave cool streaks and stuff like that. It adds a lot more sense of motion to your photo and makes it
along with some of the algae. Yeah.
Yeah. I took a bunch.
One of the algae that's coming off one of the robots.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you've got a lot of stuff that's dynamic in your photo, it makes it a lot more interesting for your audience to look at, and it's much more engaging for them to actually want to interact with your photo. I still don't know why it doesn't want full screen. So the other side of exposure there is the aperture. And what the aperture will change there we go. So you'll hear the term depth of field. This is how much of your picture is actually in focus. So when we're thinking of a picture like this other photographer here, you can see just our subject here is in focus. The whole field behind him is out of focus. And that allows you to really separate and isolate your subject, making it more interesting. But if you're taking like a team picture during awards, you want everything in focus. Now, also, sometimes, you know, we're taking an awards picture and people aren't really moving, so you don't need to have that high of a shutter speed. But if a mentor decides to run through the picture, like Dr. Joe here is, he's going to be blurry, even though you can see everybody up in the stands is actually in focus, but that's because they're not moving. Yeah, he's the one who you always hear yelling for 88, so everybody knows him there. Any questions on what we've covered so far? I know I'm probably going a little fast, but I want to definitely give hands-on time at the end to poke around everybody's cameras.
Just one comment. I talked to Mike about this depth of field thing after our first match, because a lot of the pictures I took were very busy. You couldn't really tell like what I was trying to focus on. And so, you know, if you look at that one picture of the whole stadium where it's all in focus, you don't really know what to look at. It's all sort of there. But the other one, very clear that it's interesting because the robots are moving, right? Similarly with these, like if all of that one photograph was in focus, you wouldn't know if you were looking at the photographer or the reef behind it or something else, or like on with 88, like, you know, are you looking at the team? Are you looking at the mentor? You know, so like you can use these tools to also help bring, help guide the viewer as to what's interesting and what, you know, what you're actually trying to take a photograph of. If you just present like everything in the world sort of in focus all at once, then you don't really know what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's, you know, the numbers that I have up here, this is a very base level of bigger aperture means less depth of field, meaning, or shallower depth of field, so less is in focus. But if you don't have a lens that has, you know, 1.8 or 2.8 in that range, you can still separate your subject from the background, but you have to kind of change how you're doing that. So it may be that you've got a telephoto lens, so you need to be way further away from your subject to actually get the separation from the subject in the background. But that also goes the other way around. If you're really far away from your subject, everything may be in focus anyway, regardless of your aperture, if you're just too far away to really get that to show. So like if I'm like up top and all of a sudden an awards thing starts happening, nothing I can do when I'm up top with my wide angle lens. I'm just, well, we're not gonna have a picture of that. So that's kind of another thing when you're doing an event, there's how you tell the story. So you'll hear people talk about the wides, the mids, the close-ups, and then kind of just getting everything, a combination of that. So, you know, a wide shot is something like we saw earlier where you get the whole arena, you get the crowd, you get the robots, you get the field. Yep, but that's only so interesting. You want to also tell the story of, hey, we can see this robot on the field and also the drivers behind them. But then you can also get to the really close up of, oh, just a driver station or just a cool feature of the robot, and tell that story for somebody who wasn't there, everything that happened. And this is where knowing the event schedule and looking at all those team packets that everybody sent out can be really interesting. When you're volunteering, you know a little bit more of the schedule. So in the case of this old picture from 2009, the Blue Man Group was there with our MC on the field. If you didn't know that was happening, you're probably not going to be on the field to necessarily get the picture of that. But, or like a couple of years ago when we had the balancing ramps, Boston Dynamics had brought a bunch of spots, and during a lunch break we had like 4 spots on the field balancing the, what was the balancing thing called?
Handstands?
Was it just the bridge? No, not 20, the charge station, yes.
Yeah, and they actually like, and the spots can actually like climb onto one another, and yeah, my dad has a video of like 3 spots working together to put like something on a Christmas tree.
So it's knowing stuff like that when something cool is going to happen. If you hear somebody talking about that, or like a couple of years ago at District Champs, we had a whole bunch of every team's mascot showed up and took pictures with R2D2, which was a really fun thing. So hearing about stuff that might be happening, or, you know, things that you're going to want to capture, keep that in the back of your mind, because there's, you know, really cool photos that are available to tell the story, but also just to help remember things for people who weren't there. And you never know what photo is going to resonate with some people. I've definitely taken pictures that I've seen you guys react to where it's like, I don't know, that one's not, I don't really love that one, but I posted it anyway. And it's like, everybody loves that one. It's like, well, hey, it resonated with some people, not with me, but I still shared it because it's, you know, it's something that happened to everybody and you're there capturing those moments. When I'm doing an event, what I do is I think about what I'm going to do that day and what I want to accomplish. So specifically, like with the team, I'll get us unloading into the pits. I'll get us calibrating on the field. I'll cover a practice match. Generally, when practice is happening, there's a lot less like, hey, you can't stand there. So you can get some cooler pictures than you can during like the finals when there's a million people standing right at the field. So it's using your knowledge of the event to help make sure you're in the right place at the right time. And then just get like the cool details. Like this was pit admin's cool hat at Mass State Champs. This was a bunch of notes that looked cool on the field. A lot of times the fields have cool, fun, lit up things, and you can play around with exposures and get the cool colors going on and get reflections and things like that off the polycarb driver stations. So it's thinking about that, you know, how do you get a flag doing something cool or a mascot doing something interesting? And then when you're in you guys did a great job of this year, was you guys knew that Manisha was going to win Woody Flowers, and you stationed people all around the arena to capture it from multiple angles, which was a great, like, we didn't tell you to do that, but that's perfect. Because then after the fact, you just have all these cool perspectives of a thing that, you know, not everybody had those perspectives. So like when I'm down on the field after a team like wins or has a really exciting match, like I will be annoying and get as close as I can in their face to capture that emotion because it's a really cool picture. This was the winning of Mass State Champs just this last week. So these are the photos that are freshest in my mind because I just edited them. So any questions so far on stuff? All right, we are flying. So once you've actually taken all these pictures, so just for reference, at Mass State Champs, I took 6,700 photos. I did not send 6,700 photos to New England first. That would be ridiculous because they want to actually use them. I sent about 500 over because when you're doing those panning shots and you're just walking around trying to get different ideas, and sometimes ideas work, sometimes ideas are, you look at it afterward and go, that was terrible. What did I do? Or you just were messing around with different settings. Like I tried a couple of really long exposures and they were just very blurry. I could not hold still enough to actually make it work. But that's the great thing about everything being digital now is you can just mess around with it and figure it out from there. If you want to see like, cool, what would it happen if I dropped my ISO way down and I got some strange exposure? Sometimes that works and it's really fun. When you're shooting pictures that there's no way to go back and correct what you've taken, so when you're trying to get your exposure right, Generally, I shoot in manual all the time because I want to be in control of what the camera's doing. Cameras now, though, have a lot of great automatic modes where if you put it in, sports, it's going to try and shoot for a higher shutter speed to freeze action. If you put it in portrait, it's going to try and give you the widest aperture possible to give you a subject that looks good. The camera is still doing all of that calculation itself to know what ISO should I be in, what shutter speed should I use, what aperture setting should I use. Cameras now, at least interchangeable lens cameras, but even your iPhone can shoot raw photos. And what that means is when you take a picture, it gives you all of the data that was recorded. So the files are much larger. You can't really do anything with them until you've edited them in a program like Photoshop or Lightroom or any one of the other programs that can access a raw file. But they are significantly bigger because they capture all the data that the sensor and camera did, as opposed to when you get a JPEG directly out of the camera, the camera's baked in all of its processing, its sharpness, its color correction, and you're kind of stuck with that. You can go a little bit of exposure changing and some of that stuff, but you really don't have the information to improve the photo that much. So when you're doing something that you can only ever capture once, RAW is definitely the way to go, because if you mess it up, you can bring it back into sometimes a usable photo. If you're just playing around and you are just, at a meeting trying to see what happens, JPEG's fine. Those files are much easier to deal with. You can immediately send them to your camera, to your phone, to the computer, and you don't have to do anything to them. A big part of actually shooting an event and covering something, or even build season, is you will take so many pictures. Now, I just throw everything up on OneDrive and let you guys figure it out for that. But when you're actually trying to share something with the team, only send the usable stuff over. Don't make all of your friends have to go through all of your blurry pictures that are bad, or the one where you had the camera upside down and you kneeled down on the shutter button for a minute and just have a bunch of this power outlet because that's where the camera was pointing when you kneeled down. Ask me how I know. There's a lot of the side of the field that I have pictures of that is just junk. Personally, I try and get everything in camera because I don't particularly enjoy the editing process. I enjoy the getting it right in camera, but that doesn't always happen. So sometimes you do need to crop. If you had a subject that was just a little too far away, but it's the only picture you can get, crop in. The cameras now have plenty of resolution that you're not going to lose too much quality on that. Back in the day, you would really start to lose a lot of quality if you cropped in too much, but even your phone, you can crop in quite a lot now. There's all that exposure stuff and color you can play around with after the fact. So making it more saturated, less saturated, make the colors more vibrant, less vibrant. That's where you can really start getting creative. Personally, I try and go for what did it look like in reality? And that's what I want to capture because that's, we're trying to show that. But I'm just not very creative when it comes to that. So if you are, that's a whole different side of things that I'm just not very good at. So I can't really teach that. This part here's a little bit more of tailored to the any first version of this. Share it. Obviously, you want to share it with your teammates. They all did cool stuff. Sometimes they did embarrassing stuff. I did not include any of the embarrassing pictures I have of all of you in this presentation, but they are all on the OneDrive, so have fun blackmailing each other. Or Manisha. If you volunteer as MC, you will have a lot of pictures of yourself doing hilarious, ridiculous things. Or if you're anywhere near the field, but volunteer, you get a lot of cool stuff. You know, even if it's just pictures of the trophies, or in this case, the MC on rollerblades, which is definitely not something that we would allow to happen anymore because that is super not safe. But you could get away with anything at that point. That there was no obstacles on that field. It was a completely empty playing field. That is lunacy.
Could have been ice skates.
It could have been. There
Those
was
are rollerblades.
the couple of years before this was the year that Blair came out inside the Zamboni at the Boston Regional. So that was somewhere I have the video of that because I was next to the field, because for some reason Team 1100 to this day is always in like match 1, 2, or 3. So we're almost always queued for opening ceremonies. And we always have a corner pit. Some things just never change. So that's kind of the big section of like, here's how to take pictures. Here's what makes up pictures. Do you guys have any questions about your specific cameras yet, or settings, or just kind of anything you want to pick brains on yet? I still have more stuff to go through, but yeah.
How do you is there a way to remove glare from photos?
So after the fact, not so much. If you're really good with some of the tools that are out there, you can, paint out glare, but there are, unfortunately, the only camera that I have one on right now is the camera recording me, so I can't actually show it. But there's filters that you can put on the front, so pretty much every camera lens has threads in it, so anything that's an interchangeable lens camera.
There's a filter in that bag.
Is it a polarizer?
I don't remember.
It's
So-
a UV protector.
So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do to put on the front of your camera. A circular polarizer is something that will cut down glare and reflections. So it's basically a filter that you screw on that you then kind of rotate around to find the spot that will get rid of some of that glare and reflection. It's really good for shooting if you want to get through water, because water reflects a lot. But if you get your polarizer built in right, then you can do that. There's also things called neutral density filters. And what those do, it's essentially sunglasses for your camera. So if you are outside and it's bright and you want to take a long exposure, sometimes you just can't if you don't have a neutral density filter. Your ISO is already as low as possible, your shutter speed's as fast as possible, and your aperture's closed as much as you can, but you're trying to shoot in super bright sunlight, and you wanted to take a longer exposure to get a cool picture of a waterfall. You're not gonna be able to do that without a filter. Some cameras, so this guy here actually has one built in. This is a smaller camera, but still has all of the manual settings that you would expect in any of the bigger ones. But this one actually has an internal neutral density filter, so you can just hit a button and it pops one down behind the lens, because this is not an interchangeable lens camera. This is, you've got what you've got, but you can put this in your pocket. You cannot put this one in your pocket. I don't care how big your cargo pants are, this one's not gonna fit in your pocket. Also, this one weighs a lot more than this, and you'll get tired of carrying this one around all day long. Any other questions so far? All right. So, speaking of cameras, I brought a big selection of different camera equipment. And a lot of the stuff that I talked about applies to every camera that you've got, whether it's your phone, whether it's a point and shoot, or whether it's a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. Just because you have a better camera doesn't mean the photo is going to be better. It's a trap a lot of photographers fall into, where it's like, yeah, I need to have the best gear possible. Well, yeah, it definitely helps you take certain pictures in some situations where, yeah, if you're trying to shoot sports in a very dark arena and you want to freeze the action, yeah, sometimes your only option is to have better equipment to really get the photo that you want there. But that's where playing around creatively with your limitations can really kind of highlight your skill as a photographer and helps you grow to build that information. So you'll hear a lot of different terms when talking about cameras. Full frame is kind of the thing that everybody's like, oh yeah, that's the best. What does that even mean? So for those of us that remember film, which is probably none of you, those image sensors are the same size as a frame of 35 millimeter film, which means that when you read the number on your lens, so if this is a 70 millimeter, this is a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, the field of view that I'm getting is 70 to 200 because this is a full frame camera. Whereas this guy here is a 1-inch sensor. So it's a much smaller sensor, and this lens is a 10 to 30 millimeter lens. But because it's a smaller image sensor, there's a whole lot of math to go on to actually figure out exactly what your field of view from that lens is going to be. This will kind of show you all the different sizes here. So that one I just showed there is a 1-inch sensor, which is also the same size that's in this guy here. And then you kind of get up into your APS-C, which is what most of your consumer level cameras are going to be, which is a much bigger sensor than what's in your phone, which is kind of down here in this size. Then you start stepping up into the bigger stuff. Having a larger sensor does have the advantage of having more area for light to land on. So if you've got a bigger sensor, you've got a larger area that the light is landing on. The disadvantage is those cameras are much heavier, they're much more expensive, and you know, they are a tool, just like anything, that's doing a job. Most people don't need that, but it's a really cool thing to have. The crop sensor APS-C, which is what you're going to find in most of your DSLRs that are the consumer level ones, is a little bit smaller. So if you basically take this 18 to 135 millimeter lens here, to get your 35 millimeter equivalent field of view, you multiply the focal length by 1.5 for Nikon, 1.6 for Canon, and that'll give you your equivalent frame there. So what does that mean in practice? So this is a Micro Four Thirds camera here. This is a 12 to 40 millimeter lens. On Micro Four Thirds, it's a 2 times crop, which basically means that this 12 to 40 millimeter lens here is equivalent in field of view to this 24 to 70 on the full frame camera here. Now you can see there's a much different size to these two lenses, and that has some advantages. If you're carrying a camera around all day, and it's really more evident when you get to the big stuff. So this is up to a 600 millimeter zoom lens here for a full frame camera. This is a big lens, this is heavy, this is a real pain to carry around all day. This is also an equivalent 600 millimeter lens for those Micro Four Thirds cameras. So essentially, this is where it gets comical in terms of the sizes.
Oh my God.
This and this can zoom in just as much. So the trade-off is this is not going to be as good in low light as this is here. But which one would you want to carry around all day on a hike? Probably the small one, unless you're really trying to get your workout in. So there's advantages and disadvantages to everything.
That thing's massive.
So this one here is a 5 to 6.3. So it changes as it goes throughout the range. And this one is a 4 to 5.6. So pretty similar.
What's a 4.5 to 5.6?
That's pretty common for most of the consumer lenses. So this is a 3.5 to 5.6, and generally the further you zoom out, the more restrictive the aperture will become on a zoom lens, until you get to like the bigger, more expensive stuff where you have a continuous aperture all the way through. But
Oh my gosh, this one's,
that comes with the disadvantage of being bigger, heavier, and more expensive.
yes. And this one is a 18 to 55 millimeter, 3.5 to 5.6.
Yeah, that's a pretty normal range for most consumer cameras that you're going to see when you start upgrading and things like that. That's where you get the fixed aperture, or if you go to a prime lens. So I tend to not shoot really any prime lenses. I don't actually think I own any of them. I only have zooms. Prime lenses generally are, and what that means is it's a fixed focal length. So where this is a 12 to 40 millimeter and I can zoom it in and out, that gives me flexibility. When you're dealing with a prime lens, that is a fixed focal length. So if it's 50 millimeters, if it's 85 millimeters, the zoom is your feet. So if you need to get further away from something or closer to it, you got to move yourself. But those lenses tend to have larger apertures available, meaning you can get some really, really narrow depth of field and really separate your subjects from the background. And then you get all sorts of crazy specialty lenses like macro, where you can basically have something touching the front of your lens and get it all in focus, where these ones need to be some distance away from the camera. But the thing to remember is just because you have good equipment doesn't mean you're going to take a good picture. I try and really highlight that because it's timing, it's how's it framed, and it's were you in the right spot at the right time. If your phone happens to be the only thing you've got on you, great. You've got that picture, you've got that memory to share, and you've got it. There are plenty of times that I've been at events that it was like, oh, I don't have any cameras on me right now, but that thing is happening, and I need to get a picture of that thing. And whip out your phone. A lot of them have portrait modes and things like that, which will do some of that separation of subject and background in software, as opposed to physically doing it with the optics. That is a whole lot of information. I just like talking about cameras, so I could do that all day long. Did anybody have any questions about any of the cameras that they've brought with them or anything? All right. Last couple of final tips here. When you're shooting an event, hydrate. Carrying around cameras are heavy. You're doing a lot of walking. When I do an event, and Liv can back me up here, when you're walking around doing a first event, you forget what you're doing. You're just trying to oh, we're in the pits, we're on the field. The awards are happening. I got to run everywhere. And it's like, oh, it's 3 o'clock and I haven't even touched water or food yet. I feel like I'm gonna die. Remember to take a break, hydrate, eat. Have extra batteries. This happened at District Champs. For the camera I gave Brian to record matches, I thought I had packed extra batteries and I did not. So we only got 2 matches of video and then we had nothing. But cell phone backup. It's the camera you have.
Yeah, and I have 2 extra batteries here.
Yep. Yeah, I always carry extra batteries of everything. Memory cards too. It's not a bad idea to have multiple. I've had cards fail, and that's the worst thing that can happen. Not very often. Memory card technology is a lot better than it used to be, but it's still good to have at least a spare on you. And then something to clean your lens, like if you've got, you walked into a wall and bumped something and you got a bunch of smudges on it. You want to have that type of stuff. The other thing, our events are crazy, they're exciting, but don't forget to capture the quiet moments too. If it's a team sitting down, having just a fun talk, or like, the robot's not broken right now, we're all just gonna lay on the ground and look up at the sky. Like, remember to capture all that stuff too. You really wanna tell the full story of the event, not just the fun robot on the field stuff, because also, as the photographer, you will get extremely bored if you just take robot pictures all day long. There is only so many places you can stand on the field to take pictures. You will probably get there about lunchtime on the first day of an event. That's when I will force myself to be like, all right, I'm gonna spend the next hour in the pits. I'm just gonna forget that the field exists, and I'm just gonna go walk around and find people with broken robots, with talking to judges, just anything that's different. Or for the next hour, I'm just gonna shoot volunteers. So that way, at the end of the day, I have everything. Also, don't forget to take the pictures of the funny stuff, like this rubber ducky on top of the field status light that has a headset.
Oh my God, that's
There's lots of little details hiding around FRC events that make hilarious pictures, and share them, because people behind the scoring table are the only one who got to see that. But as you share that, more people can do that.
Yeah, you should post that on like, you should like send that to like the first team.
That one is on the Any First Smug Mug, so pretty much everything that...
Mug?
Yep, it's the photo sharing site that we use. So it's where all the photographers upload all of our stuff after the event.
Okay.
The other thing to try, if you're bored, try different angles. So like this one here, I was like on the ground, camera down here, like pointing up at 1153's coach as he was running back and forth between, in the middle of the match. Also get high, go to the top of the stands as far as you can, and just mess around with the different locations you're gonna be. Scrimmages and team meetings are great times to practice. Less pressure, you can kind of just mess around with the camera. Also, great times to pick like my brain when I'm not super busy at an event. And a lot of times people will get very excited and go, cool, I got this brand new lens or brand new camera, and the event's tomorrow. And then you get to the event and go, uh-oh, I don't know how any of the settings work on this. The manufacturer changed where that button is. I don't know how to do this anymore. Read the manual before you go to an event, and
With the prepared.
can't take a picture that you need. Everybody's been bitten by that at least once, whether it's like, oh, this button moved or this menu changed. It's silly, but do it.
Prepare.
Do modern cameras get software updates that change things like that?
Yes, they do. So new lenses come out that need different stuff to function. A big thing that you'll see on like some of the mirrorless cameras, it'll be like in the video modes, they'll add new frame rates, they'll add new resolutions, or different limits. Like the Canon R5 and R6, when they first came out, really had some overheating problems. So you could only record so much, and then it would be like, I'm too hot, I'm gonna turn off now. That was improved with some software updates. So all the modern cameras, like all the new ones that I have here, have Wi-Fi built in, so you can actually connect your phone directly to the camera and get live view directly out of it, or remote shutter, so you can be up, put the camera on a tripod, go to the other side of the room and hit the button. All that stuff is available with software updates. And sometimes it's just, oops, the focus didn't work right on this lens, so we updated that. Lenses also can get software updates now, and accessories too. So it's the wonderful world of everything being connected all the time. Everything can have a software update. So yeah, always good to make sure your software is updated beforehand too, but also make sure you read the release notes to make sure that it didn't change something big that you're now like, uh-oh, what do I do? So that was all of the Mike talking at us portion that I had planned. I'm glad to see people brought cameras. I also brought cameras too. So I would love to answer any questions people have about their cameras. We can do some one-on-one stuff, or if anybody wants to play with anything and just see what it is, we can go from there. But yeah, that was all the stuff that I had fully prepared because I was hoping you guys would have questions about your cameras. But if not, you can go do whatever you want to do or come play with any of these.
What's the capacity of the memory cards these days?
They can go up to like 2 terabytes on an SD card, I think.
How many raw photos is that?
It really depends on the camera. So like mine, each raw photo is like 20, 30 megabytes per picture. And the camera can do like 15 frames a second. So you can fill them real fast. I tend to go for 128 gig cards, and I pretty much fill them in a day at an FRC event. So I have to offload every night.
Yeah, I got a 64 gigabyte SD card here.
Yeah, they go fast now, especially if you, because all these cameras can also record video, and like full 4K high quality video, which really fills up fast. Yeah, Zephyr?
How does the mechanism that takes in the light and converts it to like electrical signals work?
That is a great question. Anybody from software have any ability to explain how a digital camera works?
You don't have any software people here. Well, this is concerning. That's an electronics question.
Yeah.
More physics. You know,
Yeah.
the photoelectric effect?
Yeah, it's a.
You know how an LED makes light from electricity?
Yeah.
Imagine a similar device where light comes in and it generates electricity. Alright? So what you do is you create such a device and then you put just enough electricity onto it that it doesn't turn on yet. And then when the light hits it, it turns on and you can detect whether it's on or off. If I remember correctly, they're made like capacitors, so you actually get like a voltage out of it, which gives you a sensitivity, like a black and white level, not just like an on or off. And then I think they're still just doing color filters in front of each of them. So the same way you have like a red LED and a green LED and a blue LED, and they all combine to make white. You similarly have a red sensor, a blue sensor, and a green sensor, and then you combine those in software to make one pixel's color.
Yeah, and when you hear somebody say like this camera has 30 megapixels, that means there's 30 million individual parts of that image sensor that are capturing an image. So that's why it's kind of magic that it all works, because it's so tiny.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to like solder something with a microscope.
Yeah, a very, very tiny electron microscope to actually see every little bit of the image sensor.
Yep.
And it's kind of telling that like the camera sensors haven't really changed a whole lot in resolution. They've changed a lot in frame rate and their ability to get the images down, but cameras from 8K is what? 12 megapixel?
Something like that. I forget. The video stuff is where I run out of my element.
So, like your camera has, some of these cameras now have like 50 megapixel cameras in them, right? But what's changed is the ability to get those 50 megapixels down from the camera sensor fast enough, and the light sensitivity so that they're useful in a broad spectrum of light. So that just reinforces the idea that the important part of taking photographs isn't how many megapixels or how good your sensor is. It's about putting it all together so that you're getting the right image, and you have the equipment capable of getting that image. 12 megapixel, like, you wouldn't buy a phone with a 12 megapixel camera today, right? But that's all you really need for 8K video, right? So.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of photos that I've had published or blown up to wall size from an old 4 megapixel DSLR that if you didn't, you know, the conditions were right, so that image looks great. You don't need to have the crazy stuff that we have today. It makes your life a lot easier as a photographer because you can just crank your ISO to something crazy high that, you know, used to be like, film can't go that high, that'd be crazy. You couldn't see anything in all the noise that it would generate, but we've improved that. Also, a real cool thing that cameras are doing now is even in cameras here, just like we have on the robot, they're doing machine learning to actually help the camera process images. So the autofocus on my cameras here, I can tell them, hey, I am taking pictures of airplanes, I'm taking pictures of people, and it will actually focus on like a person's eyeball. And it knows based on that if the person turns away, it then tracks the head. And then if the person turns back, it goes back to the eye. And if something like runs in front of the camera and blocks that, it tries to predict like, all right, based on the motion of that object I was tracking, where do I think it's gonna be after that thing interrupted? So a lot of the stuff that we do for vision processing on the robot, cameras are doing to take pictures. And they have to do it super, super fast to actually still be able to take the picture of the thing that's moving. So there's a lot of overlap between what we do for vision and what actual cameras are. So like the one right now recording me is like following me around. It knows to look for a person, and that's the same as what we do on the robot, except instead of that, it's an April tag, so it knows. But this is using that to look for a person right now, and it's tracking me around, so that way somebody doesn't have to be sitting there following the whole time. So a lot of overlap with what we do with the robots as well.
Do your cameras recognize robots yet?
No, they don't. So sometimes that's a little tricky with the autofocus. It's like, I have plenty of pictures where it like, oop, I am on person mode, and it picked out that one person it can see in the audience.
Eyes.
And it's like, nope, that's not at all what I was asking you to do, but you're in the wrong mode for like stuff that's close. But it's really like scarily good sometimes. It's like, oh, what did it focus on? Then you like zoom in to see where it was, because that's all tracked too. It'll tell you in the software like where it was focused. You can have it show you that in Lightroom and stuff. And it's like, oh, it's that person in the stands in the background, like 4 layers deep. Like, why are you doing that? All right.
How does the focus like work?
So there's a lot of different types of focusing. In the old DSLR ages, you would have vertical and horizontal focus points, which were basically trying to look at like, all right, this is a thing. If I go forward beyond, it starts to split. And that's kind of the old split way of when you would manually focus a film camera, you would see the focusing screen split the image in weird ways. And when it all lined up, then you knew that you were in focus. Now, with the mirrorless cameras, it's actually doing it, the image sensor, so the thing that's actually recording the image also has focusing stuff built into it too. So it's looking at some of the older cameras, like this guy here, it's looking at contrast-based autofocus, so it's really kind of trying to figure out, looking at this scene, where do I find the contrast between different items? And that's pretty slow and not always super accurate, especially in lower light. The newer ones are kind of that phase detect is what it's called, where it is still kind of comparing a bunch of different items. And then you've got all the crazy machine learning autofocus now that you can say, give me a person, give me an eyeball, give me an airplane, give me a car, and it's been trained on some model to be like, yes, this is what a car looks like from all the different aspects, so it knows this is how to do that. And then autofocus is actually a motor inside your lens that's moving the elements around to make sure it's in focus. switch into manual focus and then you have to do it, but that's generally a lot slower. But sometimes when you're trying to take a picture of something strange or you're just fighting the camera, you just flip into manual focus and do it yourself, because you are still the photographer at the end of the day, so you make the decisions. But yeah, there's all sorts of different motors that actually rotate different pieces of the lens to get it in focus. Any other questions? All right. Well, I will be up here with all of my cameras if you have any questions on your cameras. If not, everybody else can. It was a quick one tonight. Go do robot stuff or go home, get some sleep, and yeah, thank you. Stop following me.